Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Anyways. uh, fuck. Anyways, shit. This is Manny, and welcome to my channel. Let's talk about first fundamentals of buying a bike. Um, when you're going to look at a bike, do you know what you want? Obviously, if you're coming to me, you're probably looking at UJMs or early cruisers, whatever. The things I recommend for guys getting into bikes: stay away from water-cooled stuff. Stay away from water-cooled stuff unless you understand electrolysis and all that stuff that can go wrong with it, and leaks and seals and all that stuff. Excuse me, you want something as basic as possible. Number 2, stay 350cc on up. And there's a reason for this. You want a bike that has enough power to get out of an emergency. 300 on down bikes tend to be lacking a little bit in power. I tell people stay away from Honda Rebels. They have all kinds of other problems, unless it's the 450. Stay away from stuff that might have antiquated parts, like unless the bike is complete and running. Now this mainly concerns like Yamahas, right? So anything that had Hitachi carburetors or Kawasaki's that have the KH carburetors, right? You can't get parts for them. I had to rejet my 550 and I lucked out. This guy had done another one. He had all the carburetor parts. He sent them to me. I'm very thankful to him to this day for doing that. But so that's one thing you need to be aware of, is if they don't have commonly used parts like Mikuni, Kian, stuff like that, it's something to take a second think about, right? Unless it's running. Know your resources. Old Bike Barn, Randax. What is it? Was it Parts Limited, stuff like that online, and Amazon. Amazon's your greatest friend when it comes to these old bikes. People will also look at they'll go, they'll look at a deal that's like $300, right? Keep in mind, always think about this in the back of your head. How far gone is that bike when you're getting it if it's $300? Because if you're going to have to dump another $2,500 into it, is it worth it in the end? Is it something you really, really, really want? Because I've built bikes that I've lost money on selling them. I didn't make any money off my 550. I was more in it when I had to sell it out of an emergency. It was kind of underpowered, and it was a beautiful bike. Ran like a top. It just was a little underpowered for my taste. I'm probably pushing like 65 horsepower out of it with the 4-in-1 and super trap on it, stuff like that. But it was a really small bike. And I ride in freeway long distance, so sometimes it's like, I gotta have a 650 on up. Comfort. This is another thing to think about. If you're building like a cafe racer or a brat style bike, think about this. A lot of people put Clubmans on their bikes with no rear sets, and they just look really uncomfortable. I don't like those bars. I like to run like English or Daytona style bars, whether they're as long as I'm up on top of the bike and I'm comfortable. I've been in several motorcycle accidents. I've torn both my rotator cuffs from accidents. You know, so nowadays when I get on a bike, um, I don't like bars that don't put my arms where they need to be. So that's something to think about. Also, what are your goals? You want to build a cruiser? You want to build a, you know, there's certain bikes that are really ideal for building certain stuff. I see a lot of guys taking the cruiser style UJMs, which are like the specials and all these bikes, and trying to build cafe racers out of them. They're not really ideal for that. Now, if you want to build like a pro street style drag bike, that's cool. That's what I consider, and this is what the Japanese do. They love those specials because they didn't get them domestic market. They didn't get the step seats and the high bars. They had to do a lot of that themselves to their own bikes, and they look kind of funky because they were doing them like the English did this, where they would put the step seats on like the cafe racer style bikes back in the 70s, and they look kind of funky like that. But I think that goes back to the whole the whole Dyna boat tail look. You know, the Dynas have they have the kind of step seat, but they have the kind of cafe rear fairing. You know, so yeah, and think about, definitely think about displacement, because one of my buddies bought a CB200 years ago, and it was great for around town. It was great for riding in the mountains, but he moved to another town, and he had to ride it all the way 150 miles away, and it was screaming on the freeway the whole way. And we re-geared it. I mean, it was, I did a lot of stuff to it, and just I had a Honda 350 chopper that was re-geared and everything, and it was kind of small to ride real long distance. It didn't like it too much, and this was a full-on raked bike, It just didn't like that poor little motor. It didn't like that, I had another one that was a kind of a cafe racer. This guy used to race flat track, I guess, and he built the motor, put cams in it, and it had the Excel super coils on it. It had a set of smooth bores on it, mechanical smooth bores, and then it had the shorty megaphones on it and stuff. Man, that bike would rip. That bike would, you could take that thing up over 100 miles an hour. I actually had to put a fork damper on it, because once you get, this is another thing you got to think about with some of these older bikes, the high-speed wobble in the front. I recommend putting fork damper on them just to get rid of any kind of wobbles that they might do. If you're running an older bike, sometimes it's it's peace of mind, man, because I've been in situations where even on my Maxim, good tires, good everything. I had this 650 Maxim, it was 81 or 82. Beautiful bike, gorgeous. I basically did kind of like a almost like a pro street Eliminator style bike, weekend special. They had the fairing on it, low bars, but I was running dual megaphones on it and stuff. And it one time I was on the freeway, I was transitioning over, and I hit one of those because in LA our freeways are mostly concrete, and they have joints, and the joint had shifted like this, and I hit that with the front tire, and it went into a high-speed wobble. And what you want to do is never panic. Never panic. I've been riding since I was, a little kid. So you need to think about all these factors when you buy a bike. Make sure that you get all DMV information, because one of the problems here in the state of California is if that original owner died and the and what? I don't know what this is doing. Hold on a second here. One of the things that you want to be careful of is that some of these bikes go to the state. The state then owns them if you die. State's greedy. So it has to be released by the executor of the state with the death certificate. Now, I had that problem with my 550, and I got a guy that deals with all my DMV stuff, and he got the letter of release from the state for me, got everything, but just keep that in mind, because people will off a bike onto you, and the DMV, if they know that the owner passed away, you will have all kinds of problems with the registration. Now, that doesn't mean the bike's not worth anything. It just means that you're going to have to jump through a bunch of hoops that are headaches to get the bike re-registered. Another thing that you need to be aware of is we're really not responsible for back fees. So I don't, depending on whatever your state and local laws are, you can fight the back fees, because sometimes the bike's got massive amount of back fees. I've got AAA. AAA is a godsend when it comes to that stuff. They will, get your back fees reduced, and that's a big thing, because I bought a few bikes that they had back fees on them. They didn't drop off of DMV record. They don't do that anymore because they want to get that money out of your pocket. So, anyways, that's one thing. Know your. Oh, another thing. Whatever you do, if you have CV carburetors, which are the ones that got the dash pod on the top, or with any carburetor or whatever, unless you remove all the rubber components out of that carburetor, whatever you do not put Berrymans in those carburetors, because if the diaphragms are good, if that bike has only been sitting a little while, it's got a little bit of varnish in there, use what I use typically to clean carburetors, because I don't want to go through the hassle of screwing up the rubber. I use brake clean. Use a brake cleaner. It won't screw you up. The other thing is, if you have to remove stuff, especially rubber boots and carburetors, do not use WD-40. Don't use anything that is oil based. Use a silicone based lubricant, like my lubricant of choice for taking on and off carburetors is either soapy water, or if I've got to take them off, is use and it keeps them from, when you go to put them back on. I only use soapy water in emergency if I don't have the silicone lube, but typically brake lube is okay to use. The PB Blaster silicone lube is great. If you got to get the carburetors off, or you got to get anything off that's rubber, it works wonders, and you won't be ruining the rubber using oil, because that's usually what happens. If you put oil on rubber, you're going to have the headache of having intake leaks later, and you're going to be pissed off. And a lot of these intakes on the inside, what people don't realize is they have rubber O-rings on the inside, and if you get those things full of oil, you're going to be hating life. Airbox is important. Now, certain bikes run better with the airbox on them. This is up for debate, but to remove the airbox, you need to properly jet it, and you need to do all the proper procedures in order to get that thing to run without the airbox. If you know what you're doing, great. If you don't know what you're doing, I suggest looking stuff up online, going by the rules of thumb of jetting. I'll cover that. There's kits. Dynajet makes pretty good kits that include everything, including the front orifice jets, which are very important if you're running, pods. So That's important. You can't just throw pod filters on a bike. Don't do that because you'll end up with a hole in the piston. You'll end up with a hole in the piston or you'll end up with a blown head gasket. Don't do that. I see guys do it all the time. Don't do it if you can help it. Please don't do that because you're running all kinds of problems. And I'll cover that later in a later video. But I wanted to touch base with, if you're purchasing a bike, these are the fundamentals of it. Go with something that's air cooled if you can. Go with something that has a Kickstarter. This is very important. Kickstarter's nice. If you're building Cafe Racer, it's cool because you can, some of the bikes you can actually eliminate the battery. I don't recommend it, but you can do it. You have to know what you're doing. On like XSs, you have to run a 3-phase battery eliminator. It's a pain in the ass. It's not really worth doing. It's $158 versus $40 for a battery. Just to look cool. I'd rather have the battery, And then you get into some of the simpler bikes like the Hondas. You can actually, if you wire them correctly, you can run a battery eliminator on them. They've got a proper alternator, but you run into some of the older ones got don't have a PMA on them. You're gonna run into problems. Like the XSs, I don't recommend running XS 650s without a battery. They're hard to start. It's a whole nother story for another time. I'll cover Rockabilly Ray's bike, but I still to this day have a hard time starting it. It was a bike that my friend built, and I helped him on some of the stuff, and I tried everything with the wiring. I got it to where it's timed right to where it starts okay, but it was just utter nightmare. I don't recommend eliminating batteries, not unless you can. Not unless it's something that's easy to fire up. Electronic ignitions. Now this is something that's interesting. So a lot of these bikes come with electronic ignitions, or their later counterparts came with electronic ignitions, and they just bolt right in. Know your interchanges. KZs, a lot of stuff interchanges. GSs, a lot of things interchanges. CBs, a lot of things interchanges. And if you're building a bike, know your options. If you're building a chopper, let's say you got a CB750 frame, you got an Almond Savior, you got a Jammer or something like that. I'm familiar with all these frames. And you can't find a CB and they're really expensive, the GS750 will go right in there. It's the same dimensions. You just got to change the motor mount out a little bit. Modify a few things, make new engine mounting plates. But it's 65 horsepower versus 91 horsepower, okay? Big difference. And people will be like, oh, I hate GSs, this and that. I had some guy who was telling me, I absolutely hate GS. He's all about the CB. And yeah, there's a lot of aftermarket for the CB. The GS didn't need any aftermarket because it was just a hot rod. That's my solution to it. But, I don't know. That's just one of those things that, I don't know what's up with my phone here. Come on. I just hope I covered enough of the fundamentals of this so that, it gets you pointed in the right direction for what to buy. Like I said, $300 bikes aren't always $300 in the end. Remember, a $1,200 bike that's complete, that runs, might be less of a hassle in the end than spending $2,500 trying to get a $300 bike on the road. Do not, whatever you do not use old tires. Beware of old chains. Old chain I went out and test rode a bike one time that had an old chain on it, and that chain whacked me in the leg. And luckily, I always wear Rustler jeans, and there's a reason for this, because I've crashed in Rustler jeans, and they don't rip. That's why I wear them. People always ask me, why are you wearing Rustler jeans, all the time. I wear them because I had a 630 chain come off of my bike and whack me in the leg. Okay? And that's a story for another time. building hot rod shit. But anyways, yeah. So keep it simple. Go by the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. This is number one thing. like I said, mechanical carburetors. If it's got mechanical carburetors, you're golden because they're so easy to work with. CVs, if you got to get diaphragms, they're kind of expensive. Like I said, Ranax, Old Bike Barn. What is the other one? I can't remember all these, but Amazon too. If you know what you're looking for, you can order it on Amazon. eBay is a good resource, but some of the stuff on eBay is overpriced. Mufflers. Number one thing that you get with an older bike sometimes, the mufflers are rotted off, or you want it to be a little bit louder. Don't drill holes in your muffler. Emco makes mufflers, and you can this one. I mean, you can remove baffles. So don't do that to yourself. Well, anyways, my roommate's here. I gotta bounce. So stay tuned.